The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
That's tonight. Good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Your chance to have your say, because we're open line till 1. Text 166 177. WhatsApp on the same number. Email studio@manxradio.com. Call 66 13 68. And thanks to Alex, who dropped me a note just to say, you mentioned that Esdale House in Oncombe was being demolished. Is that true? Yes, former home of Richard Maltby Broadbent, built for him. He was the man when the electric railway, when the Manx Electric Railway was being built to Groudle through his adjoining land, created Groudle Glen. So I think, is it Bailey Scott designed Esdale House? Anyway, it's gone. It's been demolished as well. That was Richard Maltby Broadbent, who created all the attractions there, the zoo, the dance floor, sideshows, footpaths, the railway, planted all the trees, and also built the Douglas Head Incline Railway that used to stop next to the Point Apartments on Oncombe Head, and I think he was the chair of Oncombe Commissioners. Apparently there's a big grand design structure that's going to be built there. You can see it, by the way, if you go to oncombe.org.im, there's more information there. But yes, just to clarify that, Esdale House, Oncombe, in the process of being demolished. And what do you think about this new big development that's going on in Braddan? Some of the residents aren't too happy about it, although it has been going on for a while. I mean, it was mentioned ages and ages ago. So messages I didn't get to last week concerning Douglas being twinned with Dublin, and the fact that Kirkmichael is twinned with Nepal. Now it rings a bell, the old Namaste thing in Kirkmichael, but the whole of Nepal. Nikki said, what does it do for Kirkmichael? 266. And the Steam Packet online timetable shows daytime Manxman sailings to Liverpool on Saturdays and Sundays from the 9th of November. So hope the berthing trials go well. Alongside the plans that have been built for 350 homes at Braddan, as well as housing due to be built in Union Mills on Trollaby Lane, there's going to be a lot of extra traffic feeding onto one of the main roads into Douglas. And as has been mentioned by some of the residents, TT, that's going to be busy. And some WhatsApps that came in that we didn't get to as well. Thanks also to... I can't believe they've given planning permission, says Mark, for 300 houses at Braddan. The traffic at rush hour is going to be awful. It is true about the marshals. I have to do so much marshalling at the TT and MGP to get their discount for Steam Packet bookings, says 083. They'll never get 15,000 new people to move to the Isle of Man once they see the price of the Steam Packet fares. No discounts for residents. So the irony of Douglas twinning with Dublin, a city with very few sailings with the Isle of Man. It is twinned with Ballymoney. So that's Alex with that information. And the reason that Kirkmichael is officially twinned with, well, actually, it's Gamarang, one of the areas served by the Paha Trust. The former head of Kirkmichael School, apparently. It was Howard Green who was much involved, to the extent that Kirkmichael's twinned with Gamarang. A similar sign, apparently, has been erected in Nepal. Well, you know what that means. We'd love to see a photo of the sign in Nepal that says twinned with Kirkmichael. It was a scheme, says 728, that was the head of the head teacher at Kirkmichael School, Howard Green. He had a link with a school in Gamarang to help the children out there. I've got a lot of respect for Oliver Radford, the Director of Operations for Manxcare. He seems to be the only one in the health service who tells things straight. In the interview with him on Manx Radio last week, he said there are 11,000 people still waiting for operations, even though we've had an extra 18 million thrown at the waiting list, and most of that has gone to synaptics. So why couldn't Laurie Hooper have said this when he was repeatedly asked? But he said the total waiting list are never available. Clearly that isn't true, given how we hear it's 11,000. Nothing has changed in the last couple of years, and all this money has gone to Manx Care. We went to see Jersey Boys at the Gaiety on Saturday. Fantastic show as well. As good as the West End. Well done to everybody involved in the show. And go and see it if you haven't seen it already. So, the situation regarding the assisted dying bill. You heard about this extra session that they're going to put in. MHK should now have all the information they need to be able to decide on the future of the assisted dying bill. So says Michelle Haywood. Dr. Haywood, MHK for Russian, said that they've got all the information. Some who oppose the bill claim it is an attempt to rush it all through. Well, I don't know whether you were listening to Manx Radio across the weekend, but this is what Dr. Haywood had to say. I
don't think it's a rush, actually. What we've seen in Keys, and you've seen Keys sitting for all day and managing to deal with a clause and then move on to it. We have had extensive hours of discussion. There's no rush necessarily, but we have considered everything. We have debated, I think, those clauses in more detail than any piece of legislation that I've had to deal with since I was elected. And in fact, if you talk to the members who were in the last administration, they say, even the abortion bill didn't get this level of discussion around it, even though it was an equally emotive subject. So there has been lots of time for consideration there. There's been lots of in-depth discussion about every single bit of those clauses, and every subsection has been pored over. So I don't think that we are rushing anyone into a decision, because I actually think Keys has considered this in so much detail now.
You won't have had an awful lot of time to sit down and actually look at the completed revised, amended bill and say, actually, do these amendments all work together? Does it all fit? You've considered each as individual parts, but you haven't had a chance really to do that pondering and say, does this all work now as a bill?
So as we've been going through the bill and we've passed various amendments to various bits, we have had Dr. Allinson arrange for us to have an update of what it looked like so far. So actually we have seen that bill as it's progressed through, and we've made amendments, and we've got the last clause to slot into it. There are only 16 clauses in the bill. So I take your point. Have members considered how all of those parts that now we've amended them fit together? I think a lot of that did happen as we went through. So you saw, particularly with Mrs. Corlett's amendment to remove doctor-administered medication, that actually the consequences of that we dealt with as we went through the different clauses. So you could see, once we had that first debate on her first amendment, the consequential changes had already been considered, and that was part of what we discussed on the 9th of July, was just further advice from the Attorney Generals about how we were going to change. But some of the clauses are really, really short, and there isn't very much in them anyway. So I think overall it's not a massive piece of legislation to look at, and I would expect that my fellow members are quite well conversant with looking at legislation by now. We're 3 years in, and this is a fairly short bill. Because we've done so much scrutiny on it, there's been lots of discussion about each of those. I'm anticipating that they're more than capable of managing to read and understand the bill at this stage.
Michelle Haywood, MHK, talking about the assisted dying bill. Well, I mentioned that Eskdale House is being demolished. That's Richard Maltby Broadbent, the guy who basically created Groudle Glen and the railway. Talking of which, it's our 60th anniversary. I don't know whether we mentioned it. Have we mentioned it before? Anyway, it is. And every Monday and Friday we delve back into the archive, and to date, Tony Beard. We're talking to Tony Beard. Actually, David Callister, the late David Callister, is talking to Tony Beard back in 1982. Tony at the time was chair of the Isle of Man Steam Railway Society, and he spoke to David about the planned reopening of Groudle Glen Railway. That's after Mannin Line today, back in 1982 with the archive. I think you have to ask whether working in a cannabis shop is a good job or a bad job, says Robert. This is what may happen with if cannabis is legalized. This is recreational cannabis, a long way away, but it's something that has to be thought about. Obviously medicinal cannabis is available on the Isle of Man. Do you think that legalizing social cannabis, recreational cannabis, will be a good thing or a bad thing? And the whole point I come back to, where's it going to be sold? If it is legalized, who's going to be licensed to sell recreational cannabis? I mean, if you work in a shop, would that be a shop that you'd want to work in, or perhaps your son or daughter or mother or father or relative? Is that would you be happy with that? Paul said, what an opportunity we have to connect with Ireland. We've got a spare boat which could run on a regular basis. Also, it could be a way of setting up a holding for the goods coming in and out of the EU, then distributed to Britain. Only saying, says Paul, maybe that's the plan behind it. We don't want or need unsightly tower blocks in the Isle of Man. Enough mistakes have been made in recent years, says Isabel. It was just a thought, Isabel, because 300 houses takes up a lot of space if you put them side by side. 300 flats wouldn't take up that much space if you put them in a tower block. And bearing in mind, we're going to have a big one in downtown Douglas. Would you think that will be something that we should perhaps think of on the Isle of Man? Is the government trying to get rid of Manx people and get super rich to come to the Isle of Man? I and many more younger families are thinking of just moving away from the island because we can't afford to live here anymore due to the costs, says Mike on 023. Thank you, Michael. Isle of Man Fire apparently got a new 42-metre ladder earlier this year, says Andy. Is that so? Because obviously if we get big buildings, they'll need a bigger ladder. 7 days of debate about a sister dying, hardly a squeak about Manxcare overspending again, despite the extra money being given to them, says G313. Derby is a contingency airfield in case Ronaldsway is out of action. I don't think so, 170. I think Derby is well past being landed on, surely. There's certainly no lights on Derby. Is there an air traffic control at Derby? Could Derby be used? This is possibly about the fact that wasn't there a plan once upon a time to put lots of houses at Derby and to create a new village, as the RAF put in a lot of the infrastructure. A 10-storey building equates to 33 metres in height, says Andy. Derby's a lovely part of the Isle of Man, never-ending coastline, views of the hills and mountains, fantastic sunsets, 5 or 10 minutes drive to Ramsey, Ballaugh and Andreas and Solby. Is it ripe for development, says 230. What do you think, 230? Wind turbines at sea affect the wildlife living in the sea, says 230. That's 230's opinion. 230 is anonymous, by the way, but 230 says we should leave the sea alone and not put wind turbines in. Bit late, 230. They're all over the place. And I mentioned, I was up at what used to be RAF Derby, which is now the business park, industrial estate at Derby, and the fact that the parade ground is perfectly kept. Virtually weed-free, and that thing closed down 45 odd years ago. And 557 says the weeds are removed in Derby and Marine Drive grass verges apparently are cut by a public-spirited person. Well, the Marine Drive grass verges are cut by a public-spirited person from the Port Sodrick end, says John. I thought it was Braddan commissioners, because it's their responsibility. And who is that public-spirited person then who removes... I mean, that parade ground is ginormous. It's massive. And to keep it weed-free is some job. People need to stop moaning, says Neil. Grow up, 505 Neil. The island has changed and will continue to change like the rest of the world. All these moaning people do is moan that the Isle of Man is changing. These people simply want to live in the past, a past where everybody knew everybody's business. Says, oh, that'll always carry on. But thank you, Neil. Derby Airfield was decommissioned years ago. I thought that. I don't know. Certainly Derby is not a standby airfield for Ronaldsway, although everybody in aviation tells me Derby was a far better location for an airfield than Ronaldsway, purely because of the misting and everything. I was in Tesco Port Erin on Saturday. The staff were wearing body cams. Body cams in Tesco? Is that right? What's happening to the Isle of Man? Is there a crime wave expected soon? Says John. I don't know whether you've noticed, but in some Tesco's there's now a greeter at the door. So is it a greeter or is it security? And Ali on 123, I've got no strong feelings either way about assisted dying, but would ask why the Isle of Man, and the Channel Islands for that matter, don't just wait for the UK government to do theirs. It's definitely going to happen there, I think, says Ali. Why don't we just wait for the UK to do theirs? I think it would say adapting a UK bill that had the weight of law and scrutiny applied is a better idea and would free up time for the Isle of Man government to work on the very many things that they need to sort out here. Because surely, if our bill comes first and the UK one comes second, and there are things in the UK bill that we thought we should have had, surely that's just going to take months and months of retrofitting to make them the same. If you've got any thoughts, thanks to Sheila as well for your opinion. My opinion is, if any doctor agreed to assisted suicide, then I'd never trust them with my health, says Paul on 008. Tony on 476 regarding the assisted dying said a silent majority of people are in favour of assisted dying by those who were surveyed. That's Dr. Allenson said that. How does he know they're silent? Also, he completely neglects to mention the questionable use of language in the survey and the demographics used to get the result. We really need a referendum on this very important issue, says Tony. Do you think that's a good idea? Obviously, the Chief Minister, although in his capacity as a constituency MHK for Ayr and Michael, put forward a suggestion that we should have a referendum, and you would imagine that will be bolted on to the general election, which is 2 years in September. I'm horrified that planning's given the go-ahead for all these houses in Braddan. Leave our green spaces alone. Enough. There won't be another 15,000 people moving here. I think that's fantasy, says 068. Where are all the jobs, for one thing? Well, I think we're in what they call in recruitment a negative unemployment situation, in that there are more jobs than there are people. So if you listen to the people in business, they say we need more people here. There's a skill shortage and there's plenty of roles to be filled. I mean, look how short they are at the hospital. And obviously you have to be qualified, but we do need people to do certain jobs. How many it is, and whether it's a chicken and egg situation, build it and they will come. Well, who knows? But that's the plan. 15,000 more people, 100,000 people. I'm with Mr. Cannon regarding a referendum, says Susan. Why are the other politicians worried about a referendum? If the public want this, they have nothing to worry about. This assisted dying is open to manipulation. Look at the horror stories coming out of Canada, says Susan. Well, they say that our bill won't allow what happened in Canada. Oh, you missed this from last week, says 117 Andy. Bride is twinned with Gilbert in Arkansas. Is that right? I genuinely didn't know that. Bride twinned with Gilbert in Arkansas. Has been for 30 years. We've had 4 residents come over to stay with us, says Lisa. Well, I never knew that. And everyone's telling me about Gamarang in Nepal. I'm not sure. Says, sorry, Fran, you're not making sense. If you just write that for me again, it's all split up for me. Do you have any word about how the completion of the new hyperbaric chamber is doing, says Terry 469. We've not heard from the hyperbaric people for a long time, so I wonder what's going on there. Right, text, email, call on WhatsApp, and lots to talk about between now and 1.
Happy 60th birthday, Manx Radio from Dapperbet Racing. Happy birthday!
Heating oil for homes, powering farms and businesses, keeping you moving with petrol stations across the island. Ellen Mannin Fuels. Call us on 844000.
People of the Isle of Man, are you thinking of buying or selling a home? Well, wait! You need to talk to the conveyancing team at LVW Law. LVW Law! They've over 20 years of experience and know what they're talking about. They're friendly and efficient. Do not buy or sell a property without calling LVW Law on 836757 for a no-obligation quote. LVW Law.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows letting rain, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows.
Discover a fabulous range of watches, gifts and jewellery at Ramsey Art Gallery with top brand watches from Bulova, Citizen Eco Drive and Storm to Acura, Seconda and Timex. Plus, all watch purchases come with free lifetime watch bracelet adjustment service. There's stunning gold and silver jewellery, gifts for all occasions and of course a fabulous gallery of limited edition prints and original artworks. Find all this and more at Ramsey Art Gallery, Jewellers and Engravers opposite Ramsey RNLI shop.
Russian MHK Michelle Haywood wants to progressively prevent new generations from being able to purchase tobacco products. Her bill would in effect see the age at which you can buy tobacco products increase by a year each year until eventually nobody could buy them. With over a quarter of the health budget spent treating smoking-related illnesses, this seems like an obvious thing to do. So, will it happen? Find out more on Agenda this evening at the new time, 5:30 on Manx Radio with me, Phil Gorn. Will the health budget savings outweigh the lost tobacco tax income? Surely helping us lead longer, healthier lives must be a good thing.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Pastor Mai, hi to Ronnie, who just said I was at the Western Civic Community site last week. They've got piles and piles of green oil tanks there. You know, the big plastic green oil tanks. Why are there so many there? Are they stocking them up to send them across? Don't know, but if anybody knows why there are so many oil tanks at the Western Civic Community site, it will be nice to know. And what's going on at the Northern Civic Community site? Well, Bride aren't paying. That's the main point there. Here's Eddie with us now. Hi, Eddie.
Hi, Andy. All right, mate?
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Last week I was on, I said I've got my numbers of things against the onshore wind turbines up to 27. Well, I've got it up to 28 now.
What's your latest one?
My latest one is a thing called SF6. It's sulfur hexafluoride. And the Green Party might be interested in this because, well, that concerns all government then, doesn't it? But it's considered the world's most potent greenhouse gas. It takes 1,000 years to get shut off in the atmosphere, and it's 20,000 times worse than CO2. So if we've got all this concern about cutting down our CO2, surely this one must be at the top of the priority if it's 20,000 times worse. Excuse my throat.
And where does that fit into a wind turbine?
It's used in the generation, the motors, and also in the switchgear and in the insulation of all their electrical equipment. All this information comes from the Bi-Intergovernmental Panel, by the way. It's all genuine stuff, verified and everything. And it's mostly man-made, which is another thing. But, I mean, to me, like I said, I'm up to 28 reasons now. And I was listening to some, or we've dug up some letter that was posted on Facebook recently about all these things. And they keep forgetting about this. If they put all this concrete up there, I forget how many thousand tons of it, It's going to interfere with the heathland up there, and they're going to have to cut the forest down anyway to make it all work. But I think I've emphasised this before. In Shetland, they've had 3 major landslips. We're going to get the same here, and we're all worried about the flooding, the landslips, everything. So it's no wonder there's 28 reasons why we shouldn't allow planning to give them a go-ahead.
Do you think this is going to happen, Eddie?
I don't know. I think there's going to be so much. I've only come across about 3 or 4 people in the whole of the south of the Isle of Man who are for it. So if it comes to, asking the people in the south of the Isle of Man, the answer is going to be no, we don't want it straight away, isn't it? And the other thing is that planning, if they get a percentage of objections, they're going to have to refuse it, aren't they? They can't go against the people.
And, that could go to a public inquiry.
Yeah, but again, if it's a public inquiry, the objections will be there, won't they? And if there's 20, every one of them, like you have said, everybody else has said when on your programme, they all had green in their agendas, right? And up to now, we have found so many things that are not green with this. I've been talking to an engineer about water, and we've got a really great theory. I'll bring it to you one day and explain what it's all about. But it's actually, just to simplify it, is, if you've got a dam and they put 4 turbines on it, those 4 turbines spew water out once it's been used. And why is it just spewing out into the river? Why not use it again and again and again and again? You can, in theory, use 20 turbines with the same amount of water. Do you understand that simple arithmetic?
I think so. I'm just thinking about that.
Well, the government don't seem to look at any other reasons for alternative energy. It's all out there, and we should be looking elsewhere, because this one is just a no-go. It is an absolute. I think we should ask that guy who was over here to come back and talk to the schools. He was refused to go to the schools because our younger generation, it's their future. So why not let them know what this thing is all about? This government, once they've done their bit, they'll be gone. They won't care about the Isle of Man. In fact, I don't think they care about the Isle of Man anyway, some of the things you come up with. Yeah, so there's my point for today.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Eddie. Good to hear from you.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers. And here's Julian with us now. Julian, hello.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. It's a lovely day.
It is, isn't it? It is lovely. Just listening to Eddie, I have to say, well, you'll know that I agree with everything he says. Just looking at an interesting BBC headline a little while ago, research finds almost 100 times more microplastics in UK coastline than 6 years ago. Well, we've got the single-use bag things now where you charge for your bags, so people are using less bags, I would imagine. You've got a ban on plastic straws. So you've got to ask the question, unprecedented amounts, 100 times more microplastics in the sea than there was a few years ago, 6 years ago. So do you think it might have something to do with the massive amount of wind turbines that have been put in the sea? Because, normally speaking, if something changes, you've got to look and say, well, is there any, I don't know, 1,000-foot-high plastic blades that have, according to the Danish and the Swedish research, I think it was something along the lines of a ton of microplastics shed off the leading edge blade per blade every year.
Does anybody take microplastics seriously? Because they seem to be a fact of life now, and the sea is absolutely. Microplastics are absolutely everywhere. Not just around the British Isles, but there's that vortex of plastic that keeps grinding its way around the Pacific. There are 3 or 4 of those around the world. you look at photos of the Ganges and the Yangtze River, and they are chock full of plastic. So, I mean, is it just going to be a fact of life now that microplastics will be everywhere? And obviously, it's only a matter of time before they get in the human bloodstream.
Well, I mean, this is where myself and the Green Party absolutely see eye to eye. I've been in rivers in Kathmandu and all sorts, and it literally is, everything is just thrown in the river. And I don't agree with that, and that should be cleared up. They should have proper policy for it. I totally agree. But when it comes to willingly putting up massive turbines that are already shedding a load of this stuff, and, the Swedes and the Danish, they're pretty clever people. And don't forget, Vestas, the largest wind turbine manufacturer in the world, they're saying that micro-plastic erosion of leading-edge blades is a major consideration in how they're trying to stop it, although, of course, the problem you've got is using things like bisphenol A, which is the highly carcinogenic coating they put in the epoxy. That's necessary to stop things like algae growing on the leading edge, and they're struggling to find. It's a bit like you get these eco dish wash stuff. It's never as good as the proper stuff. I mean, you remember during what we call COVID, I mean, the eco stuff for washing your hands was no use because it had to be alcohol. Well, guess where that's sourced from? So, when you're trying to keep algae from growing on leading edge blades, you've got to put all this rubbish into the epoxy to stop them from, well, at least to slow it down before the likes of that company Dangle goes and chamfers the blades and then fills all those holes in it. I seem to remember that Paul Evans from Wardell Armstrong said that there's no such thing as leading edge blade erosion. I don't see how that is when there's companies that all they do all year is go and fix such a thing.
But because because these things, they're nanometers, they're tiny little things, microplastic, and because we don't see them, because we don't know about them, because they don't affect us on a daily basis, are we walking blindfold towards an absolute disaster? Because you would have thought that the ecological people, that the people who are concerned with preserving nature, will be simply jumping up and down. That they'd be gluing themselves to the road because of microplastics, but nobody seems to bother.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when plastic bags were brought in because they were saying that it was a terrible thing to cut all the trees down.
Yeah, it was.
The fact that those paper bags, they're not very stretchy. So, try getting more than 4 or 5 bananas in one of those plastic bags in a shop, and especially if there's anything damp, they're going to rip straight away. But don't forget, when you make a paper bag, that uses up 5 times more energy and heat to make that paper bag than it does to make the plastic bag. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? It's like there's always a downside to this, and the trouble is that the detail gets missed.
It will be nice to know. It will be nice to know where everybody stands on things like plastic bags. And I certainly remember that. Do you remember there was a campaign called Plant a Tree in 73. That was it. Plant a Tree in 1973 was when they suddenly realised that people were cutting down too many trees. Plant a Tree in 73. Those trees will now be 51 years old. All right. Thanks, Julian.
Thanks, Andy. Cheers.
Good to hear from you. There was another one called Buy a Saw in 74, but that's another matter. David's with us now. Hi, David.
Hi, Randy. You just primed me there. What happened to the trees from the Mary Veg? Do you remember all those trees?
Oh, the tiny ones.
The willows, and
yes.
We were going to have things. I must take a run down in my bus and grab my pensions. We'll go for a skeet and we'll report back. But I want to just say, I've changed my mind about the land turbines. And the reason why I've done that now is because we have these companies offshore, close to our shore, and I'm not nautical. We were having a little discussion at a coffee morning recently, and whether there was a guy there who used to work for the MEA, I won't mention his name, but he'll know I'm talking about it, and he said, the first thing we need to do is get that cable, the extra cable, running either to Ireland, Scotland, or England, so we can actually shoot stuff backwards and forwards, or we can buy it in. Because we're not doing anything at the minute, are we?
No.
We're nowhere near 5% of doing. And I keep hammering on about if we had all those schools and public buildings, and I'm not an expert, so I need somebody to give me a rough idea sometime, one of our listeners who can spend an evening or an afternoon calculating if we covered our roofs with all these PV panels. And they're working for us in the football club that I'm involved in. We may be buying electricity at 29 pence, but we're getting 9p back. I want it to go up a little bit more, so we're pushing it out and make an incentive that's going to happen. Something's going to be achievable. And I've gone off the island now of having on the land, but out to sea, we own the territorial seas out to the 12-mile limit.
Yep.
Don't we?
Yeah, we do.
So why don't we do a deal with somebody? If it's the English, the king now, just say to the king, he's Lord of Man, we're a crown dependency. We can share with you, we'll give you some of our expertise, we can land it here, we can be a network operator for England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. All we need is some support and a little bit of money. And
regarding the government putting PV panels on government buildings, you would think, I mean, first of all, they're not phenomenally expensive, so if it goes wrong, you can take them down. But psychologically, it would say something. So suddenly, all the children would see PV panels being put on roofs, and psychologically, that will plant the seed and the idea in their mind that that's what we're doing on the Isle of Man. As it is at the moment, you struggle to see them.
Yeah, we do. I just want to quickly flip to Nepal there. And it is Michael. It's not Kirk Michael. I think I've been told off already. It's Michael Commissioners. But I remember, and the theory behind it was, it did something that we could help to another community. I know for a fact that loads of football clubs send their football kits out to Africa, all over the other place, and don't forget the Onken kit is like Ukraine. So when our old kits are going to be sent away, they're going to be used straight away, and you just see the joy in people's eyes, both kids and grown-ups. We used to send what do we send? We sent a boat out once. We used to, in my time in government, we used to buy animals for people across there who didn't have any sheep, pigs. If you give a person a start in life, he can run a business, and that's what we should be doing again.
Okay. All right. Thanks, David. Good to hear from you. All right. 16 minutes before 1 on Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Anne's with us now. Hi, Anne.
Oh, hello, Andy. Just to strike a pessimistic note, the people who are almost always wrong about almost everything will always have their way in the end.
That's a bit deep for me, Anne. Say that again.
The people who are almost always wrong about almost everything will always have their way in the end.
Oh, crikey.
Yes, it doesn't seem to me to matter what we say, they'll go and do it anyway.
Where does that leave us?
Well, I don't know, but I feel that we've got to start objecting to things with a stronger voice.
I'll tell you where it leaves us, Anne.
Yes.
Picking up the bill.
Yes.
Picking up the bill, as always.
Okay, thanks, Andy.
Good to hear from you. Thanks. So that's 1:45 on Manx Radio. And more talk about that Braddan site as well. We brought you the news that planning application to build over 300 new homes, as well as a nursery, primary school and neighbourhood centre, whatever that is, has been granted. Hertford Homes made the application 2 years ago for that plot of land between Braddan School and Douglas Rugby Club at Portashee. Manx Radio is aiming to speak to... We've spoken to a couple of MHKs and commissioners. Nobody was available last weekend. We heard from Stu Peters, but what do the residents think of this 300 new homes between Braddan School and Douglas Rugby Club?
I think there's no need to be building on more green fields when there's plenty of brown waste sites that they could be building on instead.
Are you a bit anxious with the influx of people that's going to be coming in?
Yeah, I don't really understand how they're planning with the traffic, because especially during TT when the roads are closed, that's going to be another area that's closed off, getting onto the TT course, so it definitely affect that and make the traffic a lot worse.
My view is that it's already too much traffic around. I don't think we need new houses in the area that they're actually building. I think they should be looking at more brown sites in Douglas. I think Douglas needs to be regenerated. I don't think the countryside needs any more housing.
Do you have any fears about traffic or anything like that as well?
Yes, I do have a lot of feelings about traffic. I think the Peel Road is extremely busy. The road I live on, which is Strang Road, is extremely busy. We've recently had the roundhouse built, which has increased the traffic. There is a 20 mile an hour speed limit on our road, which nobody really takes any notice of, except perhaps the residents on this road. It is actually supposed to be an access road, but it isn't. It is used by everybody, and most people are exceeding 30 miles per hour, which is extremely dangerous and quite unnerving when you're walking on the road. I feel that building more houses in this area is going to increase the traffic on our road in particular, but also on Peel Road, more congestion for people getting into work on a daily basis, and I really don't see the need for it.
Well, I just wonder what you think about this. An employee at the Western Civic Community said the oil tanks are collected by a Manx recycling company and are chipped. The chips are then shipped across. The problem being the chipper's broken. So that's why there are all those green oil tanks at the Western Civic Community site. The chipper's broken. Thanks for that. Good to hear from you. Recreational cannabis should be sold in registered shops, says Terry, with identification checked on every sale to stop younger people accessing it. It's not rocket science. It'll bring tourism here, and with more money, which is what the government only seems to worry about, says Terry. The only issue being Michelle Haywood is wanting to put up the age to buy tobacco every year. So how will that work? If you're legalising recreational cannabis and you can't buy tobacco, how are you going to do it? Don't ask me. What's the exclusion zone for the proposed onshore wind turbines, says Will. And Alex says, Andy, can somebody from the DOI explain the mess they've made of Laxey Prom? The mounds in the road of wet tar all over the walkway. It's also on the carpets of our car. Shockingly bad work, says Alex. And Steve said there is another reason that people don't want the wind turbines down south. It's called NIMBYism, not in my backyard. I assume if they cancel the wind farm and decided to build an oil refinery at Eristane, that will be fine. I'm guessing not, to be quite honest. Synthetic textiles are the greatest contributor to microplastics in the ocean, accounting for 35% of the total volume. This is an anonymous WhatsApper on 653. So that's what creates all the microplastics. It's synthetic textiles, polyester, nylon, acrylic and other synthetic fibers, each a form of plastic, make up 60% of the fabric content of our clothes. Fast fashion is terrible for the environment. So let's blame the wind turbines instead, says 653. So you think you'll get Primark to stop selling clothes at £3? Or would people stop buying clothes at £1? Cheap socks, cheap shirts, cheap jumpers. How on earth would you do that? Right, let's get to the phones again, and we've got Mel's with us. Hi, Mel.
Hello, Mr. Wint. I was just listening to the debate about the Braddan 300 homes, and obviously it's wrong to be building on greenfield sites, but what's annoyed me more than anything else is that in the planning application it says about a nursery and a community hub.
Yes.
So what is the roundhouse, which is not utilised fully because of all of the controversy and everything else, if not a community hub?
Well, it is a community hub, isn't it? So you just
why does Braddan need another one?
I wonder what they're aiming at. Well, I don't know. Is it a community? They're not building a pub, are they, or something there?
Oh, I wouldn't know that. But I just sort of was listening to it and thinking, well, how ridiculous is that? They've got an underused, massive, big facility that costs loads of money, what the ratepayers are paying for in Braddan.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about another community hub, and how's that going to be funded in the future?
How do you feel about 300 houses?
I think it's ridiculous. They're absolutely destroying the Isle of Man. There's plenty of brownfield sites all over the place that just lay empty or get part built and then they give up and they don't do any more.
I can't figure out how that's going to work in TT.
No, absolutely not. And if they're still going to want to have the TT, which I'm sure they will because of all of the revenue it brings to the economy and the kudos to the Isle of Man, then, they're going to have to rethink it, I think. But obviously it's brown paper envelopes passing around again, isn't it?
Well...
a bit like Mount Murray. Need I say more?
Well, that's your opinion, Mel.
Yes, it is my opinion.
All right. Have you been to the Roundhouse yet, by the way?
No, I've driven past it.
Oh, it's very nice. It is. I mean, it's it's horrendously over budget, but it's very, very nice.
Yes, but it's underutilised because nobody can access it, can they, at the moment?
Well, I'm sure that'll get resolved. Right. All right, Mel, it's good to hear from you. Thanks for that.
And you. Thank you.
Right, 8 minutes before 1. Thanks, Mel. I keep going on about the Braddan site just when it was debated to rezone. I can't understand why Stu Peters thinks it's a good site, says Helen. Let's use Douglas Golf Course land for more social... Oh, dear me, I don't know what Douglas City Council would think of that. It's a lot of land at Douglas Golf Course, and it's a fine golf course, historic golf course as well. So the government, Tony C's making that point about smoking. The government's considering legalising recreational cannabis. I don't think they're considering it, certainly on the agenda. One MHK is pushing to get smoking ban. Makes perfect sense. Says, how do you square that? Tomorrow, Jed Power's on tomorrow. Jed is hospitality professional, knows all about the tourism industry, and he was on last year, and he got such a response that Jed's back on. So we're talking about Visit Isle of Man, and we're talking about visitors to the Isle of Man. We're talking about tourism. The horse tram rumbles on and on and on. The halfway horse tram on the Isle of Man. We've got 5 dozen and more cruise liners that come to the Isle of Man every year, and they get off the boat, they get bounced across on a tender, get off, come to the sea terminal, get taken away in school buses. These people are on luxury liners, get on a school bus and take them to the horse trams or here, there and everywhere, simply because the horse trams don't go to the sea terminal. We'll be talking about the TT races tomorrow, more on the cruise ships as well, the coastal footpath. And it is a thing of beauty, but is it being properly used? If you've got any thoughts on the coastal footpath or anything else? Cycle holidays. There are things we call the grot spots, the grotty spots, things that just look absolutely awful, but we've got used to them because we see them every day. You know what they are. The Summerland site, Lord Street, Castle Mona, South Quay and Douglas, North Quay and Douglas. What on earth do our tourists think of this? What about FC Isle of Man bringing lots of visitors in the winter? How do we help FC Isle of Man? Anyway, any thoughts on this? Visitors, tourism, how do we help it? How do we make it better? Remember, we need that tourism infrastructure, the restaurants and the cafes for the rest of the year when you and I are there. That's it. Back tomorrow with Jed Power, and thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today.
WINT
60 years serving you as the nation station. This is Manx Radio.
Opened in 1896, the Groudle Glen Railway shut down in 1962, and nature was allowed to take over. In 1982, the Isle of Man Steam Railway Society started working to reopen the line. Their chairman was Tony Beard, and he described to David Collister what they had planned.
We are in touch with several organisations in England over engines, coaches, rail, sleepers, etc. And in due time, we hope to bring some stuff over.
What's the old track area like now? I presume the old tracks are gone, are they, or rusted away?
The line between Lencowen and Headland is all completely gone. There's a considerable amount of work that's got to be done to cut in the undergrowth back and also the drainage is a major problem there, which we are sorting out at the moment.
Yes, it's gone very wet in certain areas.
It has,
and
yeah.
your proposition is not to take it out as far as the old Sea Lion area, then?
No, just as far as Headland Loop.
Has there been a bit of subsidence of the
between there and Sea Lion, there's subsidence in the field.
Not too clever.
No.
Would the supporters club take over the responsibility of running it, or would it have to be part of the government steam railway setup?
No, it's going to be completely operated and controlled by the Supporters Association.
Because you've not had the easiest of rides with the government in the past, have you?
No, true. But, since government involvement, this has really prevented us from playing any active part, and a lot of my membership do want to play an active part in a steam railway, particularly in the Isle of Man. And the Groudle was thought to be a good idea.
How many passengers did she carry, or would she carry?
Up to the Second World War, of course, it was very, very popular indeed, but when it reopened after the war, people didn't go to Groudle as much as they did, and the numbers, of course, dropped.
Yeah.
Our operation is only going to be a very limited operation. The whole idea is a voluntary basis.
Yeah.
Be put back by volunteers and operated by volunteers, so any scale of operation would be small.
You don't see it maybe then even as an everyday runner?
No, certainly not.
Just perhaps a weekend activity then? Yeah.
Yeah, we're quite pleased. We've got agreement in principle with the landowners at the moment, and I would like to emphasise that the property down there is private. And, we are subject to certain conditions with the landowners, and these have to be observed.
Certainly. Well, we do wish you, I'm sure, on behalf of all the locomotive supporters throughout the Isle of Man and everywhere else, we wish you the very, very best of luck with this proposition, Tony, and not to end there, but to get all the other railways back into use eventually as well.
That's it.
Part of island life for 60 years. This is your Manx Radio.